The Trump administration's explicit animus towards transgender people is a well-documented and very public fact. Starting in his first term and now in his second, President Trump and his administration have carried out a systematic, years-long effort to roll back protections for LGBTQ+ individuals. This includes barring trans service members from military service and giving federal agencies the green light to overtly discriminate against their trans employees. While the administration's discrimination against transgender people is taking many forms and fostering fear in people who identify as trans, it's also impacting the families of those who identify as transgender. Roger Smith is a novelist and retired history teacher who lives in Brewster, Massachusetts. He's also the father of a transgender son, Alex, whom he loves dearly. In this poignant interview with PFLAG Cape Cod's Rick Kuntz, Raj describes the fear and outrage he feels at how the U.S. government is singling out and discriminating against transgender people today. But discrimination against people who don't fit certain social, ethnic, and sexual categories has a long, long history in America, says this former history teacher. Sadly, Smith says, the othering of people seen as being on the margins of our society is part of our nation's DNA. Raj Smith, welcome to Profiles in LGBTQ+ Courage. It's so good to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
My friend, you and I have a lot to talk about. We've known each other for a while. You are many things. You are an historian. You're a celebrated book author. You're also the father of a transgender child. And of course, I interviewed your wife, Susan, and your son, Alex, for this same podcast series some time ago. And I think because of the political circumstances we're living through right now, before we get to anything else, I want to know how you feel as the parent of a transgender person about how the U.S. administration is demonizing many marginalized people, and especially trans people.
You know, it's interesting, Rick. Frankly, this isn't a surprise. I mean, we got a taste of it in the first administration. And I don't think there was that much traction during the first administration. And now it seems to have come out with a vengeance. And I am one step removed. I'm the parent. I'm not Alex. But I have to admit that there is a great deal of trepidation, to the point of fear, that I fear that people who are going to not know Alex, make assumptions about Alex that they shouldn't be making, and it's going to be hurtful. And so, yeah, there's a great deal of trepidation, to the verge of fear, that I wake up with pretty much every morning.
Are you also angry?
I would say we're off the meter for angry. I'm enraged, but also feeling quite powerless. I feel as though there's much of what is going on, not just in the anti-trans rhetoric, but all across the board, that is going to have to run its course. It's a fever that is going to have to burn itself out, with extreme negative consequences and harm for so many people. And I'm talking about all the way from Ukraine to marginalized individuals to poverty. I mean, it just goes.
SNAP recipients, immigrants.
All over the place. And it's going to be brutal.
The fever metaphor is interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's almost like a wildfire that has to burn intensely. How did we get here?
Well, we've always been here. There's been an anti-immigrant, anti-other part of who we have always been. It's in our DNA. Bear in mind, this country birthed as a slavocracy. And even in the North, we are coming to terms with the fact that many of our finest upstanding citizens were slave owners. This is, in colonial days, but fortunes that exist today were started on the backs of enslaved individuals. Mm-hmm. So we've always been here. It's just that many of those sentiments were shoved underground and not given fresh air and light and nurturing. And now they're being nurtured and they're coming full bloom.
Well, I know you are an historian and you were a history teacher. You're now an author. I want to get to all of that. But let's first talk about your experience, your journey as the parent of a child who turned out to be transgender. Can you share that backstory with us?
Yeah, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's remarkably without bumps. It was the journey was really started by Alex, who declared at age 4 that, and I use the pronoun she on purpose, she was not going to wear a dress to a christening or something. And upon examination, and including going to a family therapist who interviewed all of us, the therapist said, Alex is fine. The question is, are you guys okay with it? And we had to do a lot of introspection, I don't think because of our prejudices, but because of our ignorance. And I ultimately came to the conclusion that my child could be whatever my child declared herself to be. And as long as Alex knew that she was loved and was capable of returning love, I was fine with it. We then continued on Alex's journey from gay and then coming out again in college as transgender. And these were all terminologies that we needed to learn because I didn't even know transgenderness existed before I became aware of Alex. So,
and how did you go about getting schooled in this and skilling yourselves up, if you would, to parent a transgender child?
Well, first of all, I didn't know I was parenting a transgender child. I thought Alex was gay, and that was the extent of it. And the question was, where do we go from here? Who do we let know? Susan and I kind of sat on the information for probably a year or so, and then the circle just kept getting wider and wider and then became part of the Christmas poem. So that was just the nature of things. And it was a pretty easy process in the sense if people couldn't bang with that, then they wouldn't be part of our lives. That was okay. We've been very rich in our relationships and have found extreme support for Alex and a great deal of outpouring of love at every stage of his life. So I think we live and have lived in a very supportive community, and it wasn't bump-free, but it has been really quite joyous.
And what did you have to examine in terms of your own beliefs and assumptions, Raj, to kind of get your head around this situation?
What I had to examine was my own transgressions in the past when I used homophobic words when I was in college, or even with my friends who were gay and not out. And I wince even in this conversation thinking, I said that in front of that person, and that's just unconscionable. And that sort of thing is the sort of thing I have to live with forever. But consequently, I made a conscious effort with Alex to say, when Alex was little, well, honey, you're going to grow older and you're going to fall in love, and that person is going to love you back, not he or she. I was gender non-specific on purpose as a result. So I think I got it pretty right, but obviously I made my own errors.
And you and Susan really tag teamed on this. And, I think for many parents, this learning this knowledge about a child would be very hard to process or deal with. And I'm thinking back when I came out as a gay man, in some cases it was a challenge for the parents because they felt they had to come out as well. So was there any kind of challenge like that for you as you kind of absorbed and socialized this information within yourselves and also with others you knew?
I had some role models. I can remember very specifically, I was wrapping up at a board meeting in Harrisburg near where we used to live, and a fellow board member and I were just chatting, and he said, yeah, I'm going to go visit my daughter. She's gay, and we're going to do this and that and the other thing. And I thought, He didn't need to tell me that, but he told me that to tell me that he was okay with it. And that became a model for me because I began to feel, and bear in mind, we're talking now, this is 35 years ago, that it became evident that the more people who knew that Alex at this time was gay and knew that I was okay with it, that meant that there was going to be more of us on the team. There was a sense of solidarity there.
What's your advice to parents, especially dads out there who may find themselves in the situation of dealing with a transgender child? What's your advice about how to engage with their child and to embrace the circumstances in a compassionate and loving way?
That's a wonderful question to ask. I think the most important thing is to listen, to ask them how they're doing, and to be nonspecific. It's just essentially, how was your day? And there's a difference, and I'm going to change gears on you here. There's a difference between how was your day and I'm glad you're home. And the difference is, you don't have to tell me about your day. Your day may be very painful, but no matter what, you're loved here and you're safe here. So this may sound silly, but there's a lot of different ways to be gay. And you can think your son or daughter is one thing and they don't see it that way. And so try not to box your kid into, in my case, like I said, I thought my child was gay and my child was trans, but we were still always playing with the vocabulary. So, that's where we are at the moment, and it seems comfortable.
I know when I interviewed Susan, she talked about this philosophy of letting the child lead, which to me suggests you and she basically let Alex know where they were, what they needed, and you were there. You were a presence, loving parents. You didn't try to direct. You tried to be supportive.
Susan's parents were delightful, and we had a laugh amongst ourselves when Susan's mom, Naomi, and her dad were talking about Alex being at this point gay, and Raj, her dad, who's the same name as me, there's a Freudian thing there someplace, said, well, my father was left-handed. And he was beaten for being left-handed. And so when we were raising you children, he was talking about Susan and her brother, we would put the fork in the middle of the place setting, and whichever hand you picked it up with was, what you did. And I kind of think being gay is probably like that. And then Flora naturally went to her mom, and her mom said, well, yeah, I think that's true in Alex's case, but maybe I might put the fork a little bit to the left. So she was being very frank and honest, and we've always tried to put the fork in the middle, and that's, I think that's a pretty good metaphor. Just put the fork in the middle, let your kid figure it out. And know that they're being supported.
And it sounds like it's about creating an environment at home of psychological safety and love. And Raj, as you were talking about all of that, it occurred to me, all of the challenges right now that a lot of LGBTQ plus youth have, they're abandoned by their parents for being who they are. They're kicked out of their homes. They're homeless in many cases in many communities around the country. And I just think it's very moving what you and Susan have done. Talk to us about who Alex is today.
Alex is a strong, stable, productive, creative, magnificent person who lights up a room, who has a constellation of friends who treasure him, who has a wonderful job and earns a great living, owns his own house. You couldn't ask for a better situation. And I think that some people at work know he's trans. Some people don't. It's a needle to thread. And so even somebody as confident as Alex doesn't necessarily feel comfortable in all situations to be out.
What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about transgender people?
That they're a threat. I think that what most trans folks want is to be loved and accepted, that they can be trusted, and most trans folks that I know just want to blend and just be normal human beings. And I think that the stigma that, no, you're not normal is excruciating.
If there are people out there listening to this who are the parents of a transgender person or a gay person or a non-binary person, where would you suggest they turn for support and resources?
There's an organization called PFLAG, which obviously you're aware of, but it used to stand for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, but now it's just PFLAG, and there are support groups all along. You don't have to be gay or anything to go to a meeting. You just have to go and tell your story, and your story may be, I don't get it, or I'm in pain, or I'm in fear, or whatever. And you will feel better coming out than you did going in.
Yeah. PFLAG really is a wonderful resource with chapters all over the country. I think 400 and some odd chapters now. Well, speaking of storytelling, you are an author and a much published author. And I think you've just released, is it your fourth book?
Fourth book, yes, The Prodigy. Mm-hmm.
The Prodigy. So talk to us about what you write about. I know that you write historical fiction, and it deals in large part, certainly at the beginning, with a transgender character named Ryan Krieger. And give us the stage setting for the first novel and where everything has gone since that time.
Book one is called The Conductor, and it starts in 1835 in Philadelphia, which was a community in transition. Because the Industrial Revolution was just kicking in at this time. Railroading specifically was a brand new baby industry. And as a novelist, my job is to put my protagonist in very difficult circumstances. And as the father of a transgender son, I thought, well, heck, what can be more difficult than being transgender in 1835 in America? Because at that time, there were no mentors, there were no role models. There was no sense that there was anybody except for this one person, Ryan Krieger, who had to figure it all out for herself. And so I'm now at book 4. And the way I constructed my books, what I wanted to have happen was that I wanted the readers to fall in love with Ryan so that when it became evident in book 5 that, oh my God, this character's trans, that no matter what their prejudice or their frame of mind beforehand, they would say, well, I think I kind of get it now. But I've changed my strategy, even though I left a lot of breadcrumbs from the very first moments of book 1, and I wanted the big reveal to come in book 5. I've changed that, and because the times are dictating it very differently, and I'm really being much more upfront about it. As a matter of fact, I sell my books at craft fairs during the summertime, and I have one banner for my tent that says, "Spoiler alert, Ryan is trans," and that's just up there 8 feet wide. And, if people can bang with it, that's fine. And if they can't, well, they're not going to buy my book. So there it goes.
And there are more books in the series, right?
Oh, yeah. We're this is kind of sad. We're up to 12 now. It started out as being 3 trilogies, and I just keep writing, and my editor keeps saying, hey, this is fine, keep it coming, so we're good.
So can you give us a flavor for some of the situations and adventures that Ryan has had over the course thus far of 4 books?
Ryan is, her father is a manufacturer of carriages that is thinking about going into the railroading coach business. And he brings Rian into his factory because she's already been kicked out of 3 different schools for fighting. And Rian takes to the factory life like a duck in water, and it becomes the thing that she enjoys doing. But her dad can't handle the fact that Rian doesn't like to wear dresses, so he's going to send her off to a finishing school in Switzerland, and she runs away instead to Russia and spends time with Russia, becomes involved with the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas I, helps to put out a fire in the Tsar's palace, comes back to Philadelphia, and just gets involved in more shenanigans, and always still trying to forge territory for herself without any concept that there's anyone who has ever gone on before her, even though I now found that person. So in book 5, you're going to find the mentor.
So you're quite prolific with these. Tell us a little bit about your writing routine on a daily basis.
I'm typically up at 5 and I'm writing by 5:30, and I write until my Great Dane gets up, and the blessing of a Great Dane is they're slack-a-beds, and she doesn't usually get up until 10:30 or so. So I've got a good 5 hours of writing in before I go out for my morning walk.
And
7 days a week, by the way.
Well, I'm reminded, too, as you shared that with us, that, the poet W.H. Auden created an enormous body of work, and it was because he wrote from 6 a.m. to noon every day. Then he stopped. And do you think that as part of the writer's craft, having that kind of structure and discipline is critical to really bringing focus to work and to generating finished work?
Well, for me, it's somewhere between an addiction and a passion. I get edgy if I haven't gotten my dose of writing in. So it makes me feel productive. Honestly, I feel like I'm making the world a better place. So it gives me a sense of purpose. And it also keeps me out of Susan's hair. So that's really good.
So in addition to selling your book, Craft Fairs, where else can people get it?
Well, it's published by Sunbury Press. You can get it there. You can get it on Amazon. Books 1 and 3 are currently an audiobook, so you can get it there. I also, if there's Pride festivals around, that's where I would hang my banner out. So there's plenty of places. Or if you're on Cape Cod and run into me, I sell them out of the back of my car like they're CDs. So.
And Sudbury Press, where are they based?
They're in near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, good luck with your writing and the ongoing adventure that represents.
Well, thank you very much. It's delightful, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and talk about Alex and talk about my writing.
As we wrap up, Raj, is there anything I haven't asked you about specifically that has kind of popped up into mind as we've been talking that you'd like to talk about or share?
I just think that parents need to come at this with a sense of grace, to be forgiving of themselves for their own missteps, and just to spend time listening to their kids. And that's not just if you have a gay child or a trans child, but all their kids, that they're just, they're worth listening to.
Yeah. Parenting is a show-up moment, isn't it?
It is. And if you're lucky enough to be with a partner, one of the things that I have come to learn is that kids don't necessarily do what you tell them to do, but they certainly are going to watch what you do. And therefore, always try to bring your best self to the game of parenting.
Last question has to do with your relationship with Alex today, you and Susan. Talk a little bit about the nature of that relationship, and does he ever talk about what it was like to be your child growing up?
He does talk about it in just a degree of thankfulness that we were as accepting and as loving as we were. I think that not everybody, as you mentioned, is as fortunate to have that degree of acceptance. He doesn't talk about his pain, his wounds, which I assume are there. But if he wanted to, he certainly knows he could, but that just doesn't seem to be appropriate or important at this point. But we talk to him frequently, a couple times a week at least.
Good. Wonderful. Well, Raj Smith, thank you so much for being my guest today on Profiles in LGBTQ plus Courage. It's a pleasure to have you here.
And it's been my pleasure to be here, an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's interview. Founded in 1973, PFLAG is the first and largest organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people and their parents, families, friends, and allies. We have over 400 chapters and more than 200,000 members and supporters nationwide. Our members come from every generation and live in cities, small towns, and rural areas across the United States. PFLAG is committed to creating a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed. For more information about PFLAG, explore the rest of this website or visit PFLAG National at pflag.org.